Well, I would say this evening or this morning, depending on where you are. I'm here with Moira Deming. Did I say it right?
Deeming.
Deeming. I'm getting closer. Moira Deeming. And you are joining me from Australia.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to have you here because you have been writing a lot about transgender issues in Australia. And my first question is, how did you even get interested in this topic?
A little bit by accident. I was a high school teacher, so for about 10 years I was a high school teacher, and I started to hear rumours that there were curriculums coming out which told children that they could change sex. And just as part of being a teacher, I loved to do research and find out, best practices for teaching and things. And I had, if I ever found out about a condition, I would look into it. And so in case I ever had a student like that, how could I, best love and support them? And so I had already actually done a lot of research into disorders of sex development, intersex conditions. And, I thought that's actually not possible. Are they talking about intersex conditions? Is this just someone misreading a curriculum? And there were other rumours that there were curriculums that were really quite sexually inappropriate. And my initial response was actually, no, this will just be people overreacting. I've done a bit of sex ed. It can get a little bit awkward or grey, but I'm very careful. It's never personal. It never goes into erotic issues. And so I just thought people must be overreacting. I dismissed it. And but then I saw one in one of our major newspapers, an article. So I took that seriously when it was in the Australian newspaper, an article about a resource. And it actually it sounded bad, but not that bad. And I just thought, no, I'm going to actually physically go and look up this resource. And I had the time to do that. By that stage, I was home with a baby, and I had decided to homeschool my child. So that was the other reason. I didn't really have time to look into people's claims, but I just assumed they were overblown, because that cannot be true, Who would allow that? Who would allow that? That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Sounds like pedophilia, Anyway, so I looked up this resource, and it was 10 times worse than they had actually described in the newspaper. And I couldn't believe they didn't actually put in that article exactly what it said. It was a survey that you give to students, and they have to describe sexual experiences that they have had. It's a tick box, things that they'd be willing to do but haven't done, and things that they might do in the future. There was no option for no, none of your business,
Wow.
Get away, widow teacher, or just no, I'm not willing to do that ever. And it was really graphic. It had analingus, cunnilingus.
Wow.
So graphic, and it was for year 9 kids. And yes, I understand that
So
children.
what is year 9 as far as because we were talking?
It can be 14. It can be sort of 14 to 16.
Okay.
Every now and then you'll get a younger kid. But it was more just, I was like, why would a teacher be gathering information on a student's sexual practices? And why is this so graphic? And why do they need to know how to perform anal? Why am I teaching them this? I'm not a brothel owner. I'm not a madame in a brothel, And I just thought, and I knew my children would be so uncomfortable. And I thought, what if a male teacher, that would be even worse. A male teacher was asking for this stuff from a female student. And my head exploded. And I had literally gone and got the resource myself using my teacher registration number from the website. It actually received a grant from a Melbourne City Council to get done. And I just thought, who?
And who is collecting the data? Is it the school district? Is it the government? Is it
the teacher? I eventually got interviewed by Channel 10 News about it because I was raging around the house. I was so angry. I said to my husband, I said, this allows the teacher to sexually harass children. This is so inappropriate. This goes against all our school rules. This cannot be legal. What is happening? I was actually having a bit of a panic meltdown. I was so upset. And my husband said, I'm on your side, don't tell me, write an article. I'd never done that before, but I did, and it sort of went viral. And then, because I literally quoted sections from it, and people were horrified, which the Australian newspaper had demurely hinted at but not actually quoted. And I thought, no.
Well, and I think that's so important because I think that your response is a lot like mine was initially, thinking, oh, it's probably just very prudish people overreacting to a perfectly reasonable sexuality curriculum.
Yeah.
And you don't expect there to be such graphic stuff in there.
Yeah.
And really, I can't imagine a student sitting there and taking, I mean, to me, that's just such a violation of a student's privacy. It just is creepy.
In a staff room, if a principal handed me that document, I would have him fired.
Yeah.
I would have him fired.
I mean, even having a secretary in the office make copies of it, I think is pushing it. I mean, it's really not appropriate.
When I got interviewed about it, I actually said to him, I said, well, what would you do with it? I said, what would I do with that survey? When they would I collect them? Would I grade them? Would I put them in my what reason would I have as a teacher to have that information in my possession? What good reason is there for me to even ask the kids personal questions like that? I can't think of a single good reason.
Not to mention that for some kids, these terms are going to be unfamiliar, and so then the teacher is going to be in the position of explaining them, or
they had very graphic descriptions. That was
the survey.
I was amazed about as well. They had, it was a 3-page document. They had the survey. They had almost like you could play bingo cards with, what is analingus, and it was like, a paragraph for each. Rimming. I just thought, there is no purpose to this. This is inappropriate, and you're destroying those good professional boundaries between teachers and students. One of the things that's very important, one of my students wanted a hug once, and I said, I can't hug you. I can see you need a hug, but I cannot hug you. If I hug you, you won't know the difference between a teacher who's doing the wrong thing and someone who cares about you. Like, you need to know that there are lines that teachers cannot cross, and they shouldn't cross, even good teachers. And they're there so that you know the difference between a bad teacher and a good teacher, a bad adult and a good adult. It's not that I don't, there's nothing wrong with you. I'd be happy to give you a hug, but I'm a teacher. And I cannot cross that line. These are professional boundaries. They're good for you. They're good for me. They're good for all of us, so that everybody's clear on what behaviour is appropriate. And I just thought all of this stuff is just destroying those boundaries for children. And they will not know that it's inappropriate for adults to take a ridiculous amount of interest in their sex life. It's inappropriate.
It's really grooming them, because it's setting them up to believe that it's appropriate for a person in authority to be talking about these very, 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 explicit things.
Yes. And, requiring information. Like, I could just imagine, people don't want to admit it, but there are creepy teachers in the system. And you could just imagine that person would love that resource. Imagine being all, they would just be lecherously reading it out to the class, and everyone would be uncomfortable. They would have no right to complain, no right to raise a red flag and say, I think that there's something wrong with that teacher. Whereas, we would immediately raise a red flag normally. All of us, all teachers, we know that that's not what we do, and we would know immediately that he shouldn't have done that. But then he would have an excuse. He would have cover. And I just thought, that's just you've also decimated all of their safety protocols. You've decimated the ability of the school to react to a teacher who uses that, because teachers, I don't know what it's like in America, but we can often select our own resources. If it's a government-funded resource, it's perfectly appropriate for us to collect all the resources we want to use in class and use them. So they don't necessarily have to be approved by the school. They almost never are. Who would have the time? You've got your set textbook, but you'd get other resources. And so teachers can just go off and say, but it's a government-funded resource. It's legitimate. Ordinary teachers would obviously stay away from these resources with a 50-foot pole and never, ever touch them.
And that's maybe the point, is that it's the creepy teachers that are going to be using them.
Exactly.
So how did that lead you into investigating the transgender issues?
So it really shocked me when I saw one of their resources where they had, what is your gender? I realized that it came from America. What we've got in Australia is really, it's plagiarized from America and Canada. And I think in America or Canada somewhere, you've got some unicorn or some purple thing. We have a genderbread man, but it's exactly the same form.
That would be a genderbread person.
That's right. Sorry. I've internalized.
You misgendered the poor genderbread person.
Yeah, off with her head. And it had sex on a spectrum, and then it had gender. And I was looking at the descriptions for gender and sex, and I thought, no. that's personality and that's your body. Why have you confused and muddled everything? You cannot change your sex. Your personality you can change. And I thought all of my boys, my students who are male, who are not super masculine, they're going to think maybe I'm trans, maybe I'm a girl. And I thought, what a disgusting lie. How could you undermine their identity like that? And all my girls, most girls aren't super, super feminine. I had these girls who really fantastic, vicious soccer players, they're just awesome, so cool. And other girls who were sort of, you just had the whole spectrum. But if you weren't literally right up the end, you were not a clear-cut male or female. And I thought that is a toxic confusion to plant in a child's brain. And
well, it's kind of like the standard bell curve, that most kids are going to be in the middle of that. And so according to this new narrative, the vast majority of kids are transgender.
I would have been.
I would have, yeah, I mean.
Throughout different phases of your life.
Yeah. I mean, there are very few kids who are, G.I. Joe or Barbie. I mean, not to mention how offensive that is, but, to suggest that that's what male and female is.
So I started looking into it. I looked up the Royal Children's Hospital in Victoria, in Melbourne. It's one of the world leaders in the transgender medicalisation, treatments of the kids. And they had a site that linked to a website for parents, and they, it was literally, they've taken it down now, of course. That's the other thing I learned the hard way when I was trying to educate people, that every time I publicised something, they would remove the link. And I wasn't prepared for that. I had never.
Well, and it makes you lose your credibility, because people go to it and they're like, there's nothing here.
Saying, what are you saying? That word's not there. And they would literally take out the one word that I had put in an article.
Screenshots. You have to screenshot everything.
I've done the screenshots, thankfully. It's not just me. There's lots of people in Australia working on it, and other people were much wiser than me and took screenshots. So I was able to refer them over to those resources in the end. But that was very disturbing to me as well, because I could still get the resources as a teacher to teach. But when I wanted to send them to, to educate parents on what was there, they couldn't see it.
Okay.
That was very disturbing to me. I suddenly felt, like a conspiracy theorist, I thought, I know I've seen these resources, but now no one else can see them. So that was a bit disturbing. I can't remember what your question was. I'm sorry.
Oh, how you ended up, it sounds like how you got from the sex questionnaire to the transgender.
And so I just realized that they were just telling these lies. And so there were two things. The resources were erotic when they needed to be, and they brought in erotic language into the classroom all the way down to childcare and kindergarten. And I just thought, I would, if any adult said that to my child, I would assume that they were a pedophile. I would put them in the category of dangerous person. And it was very offensive to me as a teacher that they wanted me to do their dirty work of breaking down children's natural sensitive boundaries to sexual content at a young age. Kids turn away when they're kissing on the screen. They've just got that natural sense of just privacy. I don't even know what to call it, but it's a childhood. It's childishness. It's just being a child. And, and they wanted to use me and all these other teachers to destroy that. And that just infuriated me. And then the idea of the idea of transgender, I thought that is only going to lead to tears. And so I looked into that more, and then I saw that all these laws were changing in Australia. And I was being erased as a woman in law and language. I had literally, women don't exist anymore, only gender identity exists.
And now it's codified in a lot of the dictionaries. I mean, just like that.
I found that extremely traumatic personally. Like, I've never been back to a public pool ever since they changed that law, because I had nightmare after nightmare about men coming into the change room with my daughters and me. And what would I do? I was having nightmares about being cornered by them, or, and this impotent rage that I had. Because I was not.
Well, and it's so, it forces you to be so vulnerable, because the new narrative is, if you're in a dressing room and a biological man walks in and disrobes, and you respond to him as a biological male, you are now transphobic. And so
if they did that 15 meters outside the building, near a bush, I would be able to call the police.
Right.
For flashing his nudity at my daughter and me.
Right. But now he has carte blanche to go into spaces where you're vulnerable.
Children are. And I just found that enraging.
So that's already passed in Australia, the self-ID.
Right, so we've got, you can change your birth certificate, gender marker, therefore all your other documents you can. So technically men still aren't allowed in there, but that's moot because obviously they've redefined what women are.
And how easy is it to change a birth certificate?
Easy. In Victoria, if you're an adult, you can just basically sign up and get it done. I think I'm not exactly sure. I think if you're 12 and over and you have your parents' permission, you can get it changed as well. You may have to have one doctor's signature, but as we know, that's not going to be difficult. And then, I started looking into the treatments, the way they were medicalising children and what they were doing to children who were gender non-conforming. And I fell down this rabbit hole and I saw that some people just didn't want a homosexual child. Some people didn't want a son that was effeminate and so they would encourage them. And I just thought, oh my goodness, you're going to ruin them. It's much better to have a homosexual child with a healthy body than a transgender child with a ruined body who's still going to be whatever they were, and you've ruined their body.
Not to mention their spirit. I mean, what that does to a child when you tell them that they're born in the wrong body. I mean, that's just it's very traumatizing, I think.
Yes, your body is wrong. It's worthy of hate. It's and
it's okay to mutilate it. It's okay to damage it.
The reality is they can't escape it. I thought, that's depressing because they can never escape it. You might sell them the fantasy that they can escape it through surgeries, but we all know there's going to come a day when they realize this is exactly the same body that I was in before, just looks a bit different, and now it functions very poorly, and I'm sick. And I couldn't believe that was allowed. And I just became very despondent with our lawmakers over here because I thought, you've dropped the ball completely. Every time I went to speak to an MP, they'd say, oh, I don't know about that issue. I'm a member of a political party over here and we have internal voting. And I actually mentioned one of the people, and always I mention it's my number one issue. If they want my vote, I want to know what they think about the transgender laws and the erasure of women and the destruction of women's rights. That's what I want to know about. And about, transgender medicalisation of children. One guy said to me, I don't understand. I've never heard of this issue. Can you tell me what it is? Immediately I thought, well, you've lost my vote, you idiot. How can you not know about this massive issue? But I did say to him, I said, how women are raised in law. And I said, for example, if I ask for a female doctor at a gynecology appointment and a man walks in who says he's a woman, could be done for discrimination for refusing to accept his services. And he said, oh, but you've got to be more smart about it than that, don't you? And I said, do it, or should you just change the law back to common sense? And he had no answer. And I just thought, what are you even going into politics for? He was just, the economy. That's nice. I actually agree. The economy is important, but also wake up. You don't get into politics for one issue. You have to be across everything. So, I've been really disappointed with that. Obviously, we have these commissions in Australia. I don't know if you have the same thing, where they drag people off to say sorry for offending transgender people. We've got anti-vilification laws, so, it can even go criminal. In Australia, we've just passed these conversion therapy bans, and, they've been sold to everybody as just, stopping people from doing electroshock therapy on gay kids and to stop all those nasty Christians from, sending kids to anti-gay camp or something. And it's just like that. When did that happen? When's the last time that happened?
Well, and the thing is that people have no idea that they're conflating these two very different things. That being gay and being having a trans identity are, they're not anywhere close to being the same thing.
Really piggybacked on the sympathetic issue that everybody has to homosexual children being made to feel bad about themselves, and then they conflate it with the transgender issue, which, they slip it in. So they said any attempt, it's really broad, any attempt by anybody of changing a child's sexual or gender identity in any, but they don't say in any, but I wonder if it works in any direction, because I would say that every single resource in schools is trying to change a child's gender and sexual identity to explore and push away from heterosexuality and just aligning with your biological sex. I would argue that. I feel
think,
that.
well, and I think that that's really true, that the cis het, is now kind of, it's like the very uncool thing. And so it seems like kids really are like, you want to be under that LGBTQ plus umbrella, because if you're not, then you're you're cis het.
I feel like it's a double-edged sword too, because yes, it's very clearly, you get all the attention, you get parades, you get a day where you get to wear casual clothes, everyone celebrates you for doing nothing at all, just being trans or being gay. No one else gets a parade day at school. We don't care, we don't celebrate your sexuality in any direction unless it's those. And I feel that it's a double-edged sword, because our resources, which I assume probably copied from yours, so they'd be the same. I remember reading one sentence that said, your gender identity can change from minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day. I thought to myself, if I read that out to my students, they would immediately stay right away from anyone who said they were trans, not because they hated them, not because they were transphobic, but because the idea of accidentally offending them when it becomes the biggest crime in school, what's the opposite of an ally? It's an enemy. And they have this language of, are you an ally? Are you an ally? So if you don't do everything they say, well, you're an enemy, you're transphobic, you don't want to
So
be the
I
enemy.
hadn't really thought of how, I've really explored how this message is affecting women and adults, but it never occurred to me, how profoundly it could affect school children. Because if they were to raise their hand and say, like, I don't think this is true, I don't think you can change sex, that doesn't make sense to me, that kid would then be labeled as a bully and potentially, disciplined.
They have been.
Wow.
Parents often ask me, what they can do. And I said, you have to be very, very wise and a bit mercenary about how you do it. Because I said, there is no human being on this planet that can sound logical and rational and explain this theory, which is a weapon for us to use, because it's internally incoherent. It's ridiculous. I said, but you don't go in like that. I said, you just have to ask polite questions. Just say, I'm so sorry, miss. I still don't understand. I'm trying really hard to understand. And just how exactly do people change sex though? And how exactly is gender identity different to stereotyping? I'm just so confused. Be really, play dumb, and then leave it up to them. If they're going to be so ridiculous and foolish as to try and pretend that this is a coherent ideology, then let them, because even if nobody in the class says anything, I guarantee you the answers that they give will be such gobbledygook that all the kids will have appreciated that you've asked that question. And it will sow the doubts. It will, because it makes no sense. You just got to gently press, and then you're protected. If someone comes and tells you you're ugly, just say, I'm trying to understand. Please.
And that's so, to me, it's so, like, I'm just imagining all these kids looking at their teacher and being like, our teacher's a moron. It's just, or worse, like, if they buy into it, then there is no black and white anymore. There is no true and false anymore. So you either have students thinking that their teachers are complete idiots and don't know what they're talking about, or they buy into it and there is no truth anymore.
And the problem is, as well, which I think I used to be okay with it, but I'm not anymore. Children really do trust teachers too much, and a lot of us are very charismatic. We enjoy that friendly relationship with the children. We do care about them. But I always considered myself, and I would say to the kids, I work for your parents. Right now, legally, I'm your mother. So if I see you doing something that I wouldn't want my own child doing, I will tell you off, not because I'm angry, but because I care about you. And I really feel that families have encouraged their children to trust teachers too much. And I would have been insulted to hear that 10 years ago. I would have said, but I am trustworthy. I hand my children over to a teacher, and I hope that they would look after my child. Like, I take that seriously. It's a big deal. You've handed your children over to me, and I would never disrespect that. But I've just realized that that isn't actually the way a lot of teachers operate, and they really see themselves as saving the children from the bad families, the big bad patriarchal families. I found out that there are all these teacher training days, and now our university degrees have been reconstructed so that teachers are being trained in that before they even get into the classroom, to watch out for the families, to look for ways that you can access vulnerable children, access hard to access children. So the hard to access children are the ones with strong families. Like, yes, every now and then there'll be an abusive family, that's true, but really that's not going to be the cultural norm for us. And then they recategorize everything as abuse. They recategorize a parent saying, I don't think you are transgender, as abuse. So it's all.
I'm just imagining that teachers who are uncomfortable with that are not going to pursue the degree, or they're going to get out of that profession. And so more and more the schools are just going to be infused with this ideology, and there isn't going to be anybody who's saying, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. Why are we doing this?
Yeah. I had an email from a friend of a girl who was at university, and she was basically distraught and crying because she didn't know if she could finish her degree. She'd only ever wanted to be a teacher. You could just hear that she would have been such a dedicated teacher. And she said, I cannot write that I agree with this stuff, and I think I'm going to fail my degree. And then, her whole life plan was blown because she wouldn't lie, and she couldn't sign those documents that she was going to teach that. And I had the same epiphany because I'd come home with my babies. I had decided to homeschool my daughter. At that stage, I was only going to do it for a year and send her to a different school. And I thought, well, after I go back to work, I'll go back to state schools, public schools, because they need good teachers. Because I had started tutoring a boy from a state school, and I was just horrified at how low the standards were. And I thought, I've been teaching for 10 years. I should go out and be in those difficult schools. I should try and help there. I think I could handle it, and then after I came out against all these curriculums, against the transgender ideology, the indoctrination publicly, I knew that I had blown up my career. And the only job I would ever get now is in a Christian school, which I had literally vowed to sort of, leave behind and try and go out and, do good elsewhere. But that's gone now. And if I do get a job, it'll be amazing. But yeah, I won't get a job in a public school ever again, or probably even any kind of government job. It doesn't matter to me. My husband and I, we knew that before it happened. And, we just made the decision, so my husband's pretty quiet on social media. We try and keep our family activism to just me, so that if there's any fallout, he's still got a job. Hopefully they won't go after him. But, he's careful not to give them any ammunition.
Well, and it's I think your situation is very similar to mine and a lot of other people's, that we blew our career just to speak out about this, that we probably won't ever get a job in our field, and maybe not get jobs, ever in certain areas because of our activism in this area. And it just again and again occurs to me how the trans activists talk about being marginalized and oppressed, and yet they're the ones who are getting the parades. They're the ones who have their agenda in every school. They're the ones who are getting laws passed, and we are systematically being stomped down, and our protections are being taken away. And it's just astounding to me watching this and trying to figure out how it's getting traction.
Yeah, so watching that from a teacher's perspective, I had never, in my whole decade and a bit of teaching, I had never seen anything like the amount of money being poured into anything other than these trans, sex ed, transgender ideological resources. They had never done that for gay kids. They had never done that for just bullying. They had never done that for the sake of literacy.
Or autism,
or special, even just, I think, this is my personal opinion as a teacher, I get all these kids in high school and they are illiterate and they think they are stupid. And I think you are not stupid. You are illiterate. You just need to be re-educated, and it is a disgrace that they kept passing you up through the system, blaming you, when really some time should have been set aside and said, you know what, you don't know how to read up to a really comfortable level yet. And you are not going to enjoy high school if you can't read comfortably. So we're going to, take you out of, I don't know, some other subject. They should have streamlined the curriculum. Like, no effort has been put into anything else that I've ever seen. Not such a coordinated, well-funded effort ever before on any issue than transgender and just that extreme sexualization of the curriculum. I've never seen it. It's no government bureaucratic organization has ever been so efficient.
Well, and the funding issue is huge. I mean, they have in the U.S. they have gender clinics who send representatives into the school basically to recruit. And like you said, the funding, these are the programs that have money. And so, you have, if you want to, be part of the fun after school club that has a whole lot of funding, it's going to be the LGBTQ club. And so it's baffling how much money is just being poured into it and how the schools are allowing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, no other anti-bullying. So in Australia, it was called Safe Schools, and it was supposed to be this anti-bullying resource for homosexual kids. It actually didn't say anything about transgender up in the name. And it was called Safe Schools. And so that was one of the reasons why I didn't worry about it. I'm like, well, I don't let people bully gay kids. I've never actually seen someone get away with bullying a gay kid. I've never seen it. Everybody stomps on that. Everybody stomps on all the bullying. It keeps popping up because that's human nature, but no one just lets it go.
Except for the trans bullies, because they really are bullying people.
Exactly. And the other thing that really was disturbing to me was how when I was reading this curriculum and I was reading, all the things you got to do for the trans kids and the homosexual kids and all this stuff, I thought, you're actually teaching them to be really narcissistic. If I had a gay kid or a trans kid, I would never allow them to make the whole world about themselves. And I would never say to a child, this was another red flag for me, that your happiness depends on making other people like you. I thought, that's a recipe for disaster. You cannot make other people like you. And if they don't like you, it's not a crime. Nobody has to be your friend. Nobody has to enjoy your personality. Nobody has to hang around with you. It's not necessarily exclusion. They just don't get along with you. Relax.
And that's how kids learn how to get along with others, is that they kind of have those negotiations. Like, oh, I'm doing this. People don't seem to like it. If everybody doesn't like me, maybe I need to look at myself and figure out what I need to do differently. But now it's just the opposite. And in fact, I hear over and over again that if the external world doesn't validate me, now that's violence towards me. So if somebody misgenders me or uses the pronoun that I don't like, that's now considered violence. Not only that, but it's such a like heinous form of violence that I might have to kill myself because of it.
Everybody would understand if you did. Why are you giving them permission? Why are you giving them permission to roll over and be devastated if someone's mean to them? Why aren't you saying to them, some people in life are awful, but you can handle it. You can get stronger. You can be resilient.
Instead, we're teaching them to be fragile and
I thought that's the opposite of what I have been working all these years to achieve with all of my kids. I don't even know what their sexualities were because I didn't ask them. I think I did have a few gay kids, but it just didn't matter. I didn't care. I said all the same thing to all of them, and I used to warn them. I used to say, you think bullying is bad here? It is worse in the workplace. You wait till you find adults who got all the way through school being bullies and never changed. They're even worse because they can't control their little island in school. They're so manipulative. I said, they're even better at bullying you and getting away with it. So you need to get prepared. If someone bullies you in the workplace, you can't just sit around and cry about it. I used to always say this to them, look, you need to get evidence. If you are going to complain about someone, you get evidence first. Don't start spreading rumors about them. They will annihilate you. They are better at bullying than you will ever be at defending yourself without evidence. I said, you need to start thinking, not crying. You need to pull yourself together. You need to defend yourself. And, it takes.
And that's what you're saying kind of reminds me of where, a lot of us are coming to now with feeling very bullied, that we are trying to accumulate evidence to show that, in fact, men do self-ID to get access to vulnerable women in spaces where they are, expecting privacy. And we're putting together this case to show that we are being bullied, to show that our protections are being taken away, that we're being erased, and yet nobody's listening. And so it's so ironic that all of this is sort of under this anti-bullying umbrella, and yet what's resulting in extreme bullying.
Well, you look at their tactics, they went straight to the law. They went straight to the law. They didn't persuade anybody of their ideology. They just went straight to the law and changed things so that they get it their way. I think the only way we're going to win is if we go to the law, and that takes a case and that takes time, and that's going to take money, and we all need to work together. And I really like the way that people are putting aside any other political differences that they have, like big ones, big, really painful ones, like are you pro-life or not? Are you conservative or left-leaning? People are putting those aside because we can all see actually there's child abuse happening, and people from all sides of politics are condoning it. And, regardless of all that, the people who are interested in child protection need to work together cohesively and, in a really wise way, in a really savvy way to do something about the law.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that's kind of neat about this is that it is bringing together people who normally would never affiliate with each other. And to me, I think that's that's great. And it is a challenge because, like you said, we have all different ideas about other issues. There isn't, a lot of cohesion on those issues, but this is the one issue that's bringing a lot of people together because we see that it's hurting women and children.
And I think it's also helpful to just train us or reteach us. I wrote an article on this actually for Feminist Current. I think it really is a lesson in the necessity of freedom of speech for everyone, not just for us. And that's something that I think that lesson was forgotten with all this fighting and this cancel culture and identity politics. You don't get to speak on that. You don't have a uterus. You don't get an opinion, or you're not Black. You don't have an opinion. You're not a man. You don't get to have an opinion. All of that. You don't get to have an opinion. That's absurd. Everyone gets to have an opinion. If it's wrong, it's wrong. But we need to listen to each other, and we need to respect the fact that everyone's allowed to speak. Personally, I would rather people told me what they really thought about things so that I would know who they are, especially these people, putting pedophilic garbage in our school curriculums. And yes, we have found out who they are. And in Australia, we've got, literal pedophilia apologists. We have a guy called Gary Dowsett who was involved at some level. Another guy called Stephen Angelides, and they have said atrocious things that, if I was a police officer, I would get a warrant for their computers based on what they just said. And they've published it in these, magazines in 1982 or 3 or something, and they've never retracted it. And they've just gone up and up and up in academia. And then the government hired them to oversee curriculum development for sexuality and gender of children. And you just think, wow, I've just been carrying on with my life, working away, not watching, not realizing how important it is to be involved in public life. That's a real lesson that I've learned. I think I was very lazy. I was just not lazy. I just didn't know how important it was. I didn't know how wrong it could go.
I think that's a lot of us are just like, people ask me like, what's at the heart of this? And I say big pharma and pedophilia, and somehow they came together, and boy, are they a force to contend with. And I think most of us had no idea. I mean, most of us have a sense that we want to protect children and that pedophilia is not okay. And it's never even occurring to us that the schools might be grooming our children.
And trying to use people like me to do it. I was so offended. I am not doing this. You have just ruined the job of teaching. I would rather lose my job. And that was when I got interviewed by the Australian News Network. That's what I said, that I would rather lose my job than teach some of this content. I would, if it comes to that, I won't be a teacher because I'm not being involved in destroying children's healthy boundaries with adults and, about sex. That shouldn't, you shouldn't expect me. That shouldn't be part of my job description. Actually, nobody should be allowed to do that.
No, really, it's kind of sexual harassment to expect you to do that.
the article said it was sexually harassing of children. Because, all you have to do is say, would this be allowed in a staff room or any other work context with adults? And it's a very clear no.
If I started talking about these things on the bus, would people move away from me and glare at me? Yes.
Someone talking to a kid about that I would intervene and say, why are you talking to a kid about that? You sound really, really dodgy, But I'm like that.
Yeah, I would call the police if I heard somebody talking like that to a child. I mean, I would assume that they were.
Listen, I would start filming.
Yes. So where do you go from here? You're no longer teaching, you're going to homeschool, which I think is a phenomenally good idea at this point. I really encourage, I never thought, I used to be like such a strong advocate of public education. My PhD is in education. I absolutely was 100% public education. And now I always tell people, if you can homeschool, do it.
Really
and
sad.
It breaks my heart.
It has the it has the capacity to be good, but unfortunately, yes, there's been too much trust put in that institution. And that's coming from me as a teacher. I used to have a conversation with my kids early on when phone cameras came out, and, we found out that one of the kids had filmed another teacher and put it online. And I said, oh, please don't do that to me. That would be so humiliating. I said, if I do something wrong, there are 20 of you here to tell on me. And I would say, sorry, wouldn't you want to work it out with me? But then I watched what he had filmed and put on the internet, and I changed my mind, because the teacher was an idiot and they had tried to tell on him and nothing had been done. And so I changed my mind on that. I said, you know what? If you have to film, if something inappropriate is going on, I suggest you get evidence. I've changed my mind. And I said, but I hope you would never do that to humiliate anyone, to humiliate a teacher just for not doing a good enough job or something. But I said, if it's something really criminal and really bad, I absolutely have changed my mind and you should get evidence. Well, where to from here for me is, so I'm a researcher now. I've still got my teaching accreditation, and I'm on the role at a Christian school to do emergency teaching. I was terrified I wouldn't get that, even considered. But when they had me in, it was really funny. They said, Moira, we have never, ever had so many requests for enrollment. These are people who are Muslim, atheist, Buddhist. We are upfront. We say, we will teach your children the Bible. And they said, we don't care. So long as you're not teaching the transgender stuff, so long as you're not teaching them all that highly sexualized stuff, we don't care. We will teach our kids at home what we want them to know about spirituality or atheism, and we'll just say that, you go to a Christian school, they disagree with you, be respectful, that's fine, which is, I think is wonderful. But just do not teach them that transgender ideology. They are petrified. And so they have had to take out a new, big loan from a bank to build more classrooms, more buildings. They've never been so financially stable ever, because it's a mass exodus. They're doing anything they can, going into debt to send their kids to these, mid-level fee private schools.
Which is really sad for the kids who are stuck in the public schools. I mean, they're sort of at the mercy of this ideology now.
Yes, which is, and it'll be probably the kind of parents who would be very trusting and wouldn't quite realise perhaps how bad it is. And how deliberately they are indoctrinating your children. I had lots of Christians actually say to me, you got to prepare your kids for the real world. Don't send them to a Christian school or homeschool them. Like I was mollycoddling my kids. And I said, if they were neutral, I would be fine with that. They are not neutral anymore. Nowhere near it. And I think you're underestimating the charisma of teachers. I said, my students really liked me, and if I said something, they took me seriously. And if I had said this garbage, I think they would have been very much more likely to believe me than their parents, really, in some cases, which is I'm horrified at now. I didn't understand how dangerous that was back when I didn't think that there are so many teachers who were really actively against parents. And schools, I found out that schools changed the language, from the clientele being the parents. The clients are the students now, and the parents, they're just bed and breakfast.
They're sort of in the way.
They're just literally like maids for the children, the real clients, so they decide what they will and will not tell the parents. The real clincher when I realized my job was really, really, truly over was, when I realized a man could say, that he was a woman, so a male colleague. And I was thinking, okay, it's swimming carnival day. I'm on duty in the change rooms. I already find that very awkward for the girls. I take a book and I say, I'm here to stop you bullying each other and to stop anyone else coming in here and hurting you. I will sit here and read my book. If you need me, call out. And then I read my book just to give them a bit of privacy. And they're fine with that. And, you know, if a man came in and said, I'm a woman, I'm going to take over, I know they wouldn't want me to let him in there. And I thought I wouldn't let him in. I would stand in his way. I don't even know what would happen. I don't know what I would do, but I wouldn't let him in. And then I would lose my job, without a doubt. And the other one was when, you know, we have a section in one of the materials saying that teachers are to assess, schools and teachers are to assess the suitability of the family for being told whether or not their kid is living as a different gender at school. And I thought, so be parent-teacher interviews, and you've literally directed me to lie to the parents about something so drastic as the fact that their kid is living as pretending to be a different sex at school. And I just thought, no, I would be furious as a parent. You know, I have children. I'm not an idiot. I would be fuming. How dare you? How dare you decide what is important to tell me about my child? And I just thought, all this topsy-turvy. You know, children belong to their parents. They do not belong to the school. They do not belong to the government. It was just all upside down. And I didn't know how it had happened. I didn't know when the documents had changed, all while I was there, apparently, you know, having my teaching career, and everything had changed under my nose. And I just, no one was told, you know, of course they wouldn't announce that. You know, but now I do research, I write articles. Last night when I was talking to you, it was about 2 a.m. for me. I had just finished writing another article, which I'll send off today. So I try and write articles to raise awareness. We're really trying to get a parliamentary inquiry going into the transgender treatments of minors in Australia. It was being looked at by one party, and then after an extended period of lobbying by, you know, the trans lobby, they said, oh, someone else can do it, basically. You know, perhaps the states can do it or whatever. But there's no backbone to get it done, sadly, and it's very disappointing. And I think it breaks my heart, but I really feel like we're only going to defeat this when the grown-up destroyed children start to speak up and get a voice in the media.
Which means a whole generation of kids who are...
And that disgusts me. And in the meantime, I'm doing my best to just write a lot of articles. I don't know, I'm doing what I can. I write these updates every month for my research job. I work for a church and nation committee, just updating people about changes to law and planned changes to law that could affect how religious institutions operate and Christians can live their lives. And, you know, at the moment, I don't even have enough space to fill it all in. There's so many anti-vilification laws that are coming in to make using the wrong pronouns hate speech. You can go to jail for 6 to 12 months.
Gosh.
Like
Can you imagine? So what about these religious institutions, these religious schools? Are they going to be protected, or are they going to be coerced into accepting this ideology?
Well, in Australia, we don't have a positive right to religious freedom like you have in America. We just have a few exemptions to anti-discrimination laws. Literally, all of our religious freedom is based on a few little exemptions, 2 or 3, to anti-discrimination laws. So we are extremely vulnerable in Australia, and they are going after those anti-discrimination exemptions with all types of legislation. Every level of our state, we have state and federal. And they slip the language in so that it undermines all of our religious protections. And so I actually think that if these laws get through, they've already been written, I don't think we will have freedom of religion at all in Australia anymore. And I know that's quite a large call to make, but I don't see how it could exist without those exemptions. And once they're gone, everything that we do can be categorised as hate and criminal. We can be dragged off to a civil court or a criminal court, and it's going to be a matter of renouncing what we believe or being punished. And that's amazing in this day and age, after having fought for all these freedoms. You know, you think about, you know, the British and American history, all those beautiful, you know, legal foundations that we had, and they've just been very, very systematically eroded over time. And, you know, people like me, we weren't on watch, we weren't on guard. My husband was. My husband's always been very political and encouraging me. You know, once I got in, I was a believer that yes, it's important. It's so important. You know, we're almost right at the end of our rope in terms of what we've got left to hang on to.
Well, and it's not just religious freedoms; it's even the ability to advocate for yourself as a woman is going to be considered hate speech.
Which is why it's so good to have, you know, feminists, left-wing atheist feminists, you know, all these different people who, you know, women who understand what's happening to them, because, you know, and we can work together. And I think I am seeing that we are starting to work together. And so I do have some hope about that. And I think I wrote an article about the conference. You were there, the online one.
Oh, can I get a witness?
Yes, that one. I wrote an article about that, and I was talking, you know, about this whole issue about how all these different political, you know, for people from all over the political spectrum are working together to do something about it. And I do see that more and more, and I think that's the way that we are going to win against it. I really don't see that it can last forever. I do think it will last for a long time, sadly. But I think, you know, people can't put up with it. You know, people will just know that you know, men love women. My husband loves me. We have 3 daughters. He's not going to put up with it. He's furious. It's not just women. You know, it's the men that love women. You know, they love their wives, their daughters. You know, my husband is just beside himself with fury over the idea that any of that could be happening. And he's very happy we're homeschooling. You know, I didn't even homeschool at first for that. I just homeschooled for the better academic outcomes, and you know, and the rich family life. I've just loved it. But yeah, I would never send them back now. I had planned, you know, I was always open to sending them back originally, but not anymore. Even just on academic terms, I wouldn't bother because they're just so far. They're just thriving.
Well, they're focusing so much energy on all these non-academic efforts that the academics are suffering so much.
Yeah. And the academics that they do focus on, you know, it doesn't matter because all they've done is pass children up by age instead of by history. And so the children start to blame themselves, think of themselves as stupid. And I think, you know, no, the system has not served you well. It has not educated you. You know, you aren't stupid. You know, you can tell by speaking to a child, you know, roughly, you know, what they should be able to write because they can think about ideas, they can comprehend what they've been told and read, but they cannot write it, you know, to achieve a good grade, which is very sad because
it just,
you know,
strikes me as like if you want to control a population, you lower their literacy and you teach them to accept lies. I mean, that's a great way to control a population because you have people who don't know what's real, who don't know what's truth, who don't know what's fact or fiction, and they don't have the skills to be able to investigate it.
And so they're insecure. That's what I mean. I said to my husband, you know, I said, by removing the high quality of education, they have no confidence. And so anyone could tell them anything and they have such a low self-confidence, they'll think, oh, okay, if you say so, because I got C's at school. You know, I got low grades at school, so all right, I guess you're probably right because you work for the government, you're an expert, and, you know, and no, that person probably got exactly the same grades at school and is just spouting the rubbish.
Happens to have the money to be able to insinuate themselves. So just out of curiosity, where you live, what are the policies regarding children transitioning, getting those services? Because more and more here in the U.S., they're passing legislation to give children publicly funded conversion resources. You know, what I call it is conversion. You know, they're taking a child and medically transitioning them. What is happening where you are?
This is completely publicly funded.
Okay, so at what age are kids doing this now?
So you can get puberty blockers from about 8. You know that when they're on puberty blockers, that's it. They never come to their biological reality.
Well, you're basically inducing a developmental delay. I mean,
yeah, and you're inducing that biological, you're entrenching this disconnect between their body and their psyche. You're entrenching it, and you're bypassing that natural puberty, which, as you know, people like you and me, we all know, if you did the watch and wait process, most of them would be fine. Some of them would be gay. It wouldn't matter. They'd all be healthy. Why would you interfere with that? And then if they really still continued in their gender dysphoria as an adult, you know, that, you know, I'd be sad if they mutilated their bodies at that stage, but, you know, at least you gave them the very best chance.
Well, at least their bodies are going to be healthier. They're not going to be undermined, because when you give these kids things before they've gone through puberty, you basically throw their body into a kilter. I mean, there's really no coming back from that. Whereas if you've already gone through puberty and you take them, the damage is going to be much less severe.
So everything's paid for. It's all, they are linked in with the schools. They have programs. I went to a program at the Royal Children's Hospital under my own name as a teacher. They just let me come in, even though it was for health workers, because it was just this open lecture. So I went, didn't do anything illegal, but I just felt, I was actually sweating by the time I came out, because I felt that I was, you know, being a spy. But I have screenshots of this presentation where they talk about how to get around parents and how to access hard to access children. And they were talking about the kids who are more likely to be, you know, trans. And it was just this shopping list of emotionally vulnerable children from, and I thought, wouldn't you deal with all those emotional vulnerabilities with eating disorders, with if they're bullied? You know, she was going through all the list of kids that are more likely to be trans. And I thought, you're talking about the emotionally broken children with poor social networks and poor support at home. That sounds extremely predatory.
And now you're going to take them and basically sterilize them. I mean,
there was a nurse at the back, actually. It was so hilarious. She said, you know, what did she say? She was one of those anesthetists. And she said, look, we have global protocols. She was going on about how you have to respect their trans identity and stuff. And it was in a medical context. And, you know, she said, you know, I have global protocols. She had some language where she said, you know, if it's a male patient, I have to do certain amounts of drugs via body weight. And if it's a female patient, it's different. And she said, if I do something different to that, they could die and I could be sued. What do you want me to do? You know, I have to treat their body. And she said, I've got one coming in next week for, obviously, bottom surgery, you know, a massive operation at Child's, because this is a child gender clinic. So it would be under 18. And the woman, she just, you know, was like, oh, whatever you need to do, say whatever you need to say on the form, just don't let them see it.
Wow.
We all know what sex they are. This was at the end of a presentation where she had undermined the whole concept of sex, talked, you know, she didn't actually provide any research, you know, in a hospital with medical doctors. And then, you know, at the end she had to admit, oh, you know, whatever you need to do to treat their bodies, that's fine. Just don't let the patient see the form where you refer to them as their biological sex. That was her answer. And so, and then the nurse asked again, she's saying, are you asking me to fill out duplicate forms? And she said, I think that's illegal, you know. And the nurse was like, just whatever, we'll talk about that later. She didn't want to answer and moved on to the next question. And I just thought, I feel very sorry for them, because, you know, it sounded like she felt very vulnerable to legal action, and very confused, you know, legal action over misgendering someone, because you know how they have to read out the name, tell me blah blah blah. I think she was very worried about getting sued on that front, and also worried about being sued for medical malpractice. She was very, very distressed, this nurse.
Well, we're setting up this whole society that just is crazy. And so, I mean, when you have doctors who are concerned about being sued because they might mistreat a person because that person is insisting that there's something that they're not, but at the same time, if they question that person, then they could get thrown in jail. I mean, there's no way to win on this.
Trans man went into a hospital complaining of pain. They were saying, are you pregnant? Could you be pregnant? And that was completely triggering, and that person got completely furious, but they were pregnant and they were going through a terrible miscarriage. It was so traumatic for everybody.
Well, yeah. And not to mention teaching these people that being misgendered is such a heinous offense that the person should be criminalized for it. I mean, just the whole narrative. I think it's bad here in the US, but I think it's worse where you are.
the article that I've just written is about how I think it's psychologically abusive to me to force me, to compel me to say something that I do not believe. I think that's psychological abuse to make me say that I believe it, and repeatedly to make me write it down that I believe it, to make me, I think that's humiliating and degrading to me. I think that's an abuse of my human rights. I think that's an abuse of children's human rights. I think that's an abuse of everybody else's human dignity and right to conscience and
Well, and it's not just your beliefs, they're basically compelling you to lie. I mean,
yeah.
it's not just how you feel about it. It's fact that they're compelling you to lie under penalty of crime.
Even if I agreed with their subjective nonsense, I could say, but I don't believe that. If you want to say truth is subjective, that's fine. But then you would still have to respect my truth. But they
Right.
don't.
See, and that's the thing, is either there's truth or they're not, or then everybody's subjective truth is equally valid, and they reject both of those propositions.
Right. Yeah. And that's that narcissism. That's that, in internal incoherence and, the seeds of failure. Like, it cannot be sustained. It cannot be sustained because it bears no resemblance to objective reality. It just, the effort it takes to keep up that pretense is just insurmountable. And I do hope that it will fall over sooner rather than later. But
Well, and I appreciate your work. I'm gonna, if you could send me all the links to these articles, I can include them in the description of the video. And as we're kind of rounding this up, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about before we go?
I don't think so. I just thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I've been following Hands Across the Aisle and then Compassion Coalition. I've been following you guys for a long time. I think I emailed somebody years and years ago saying, can we get this going in Australia? Would you open up an Australian chapter? At that stage, they didn't even want to tell me their identity. I know who it is now, but so I'm just really proud of you guys for all the work that you're doing, and just want to say thank you. And I love what you're doing, and I just want to encourage you. You've been an encouragement to everybody else around the world as well. So.
Well, and thanks so much for what you're doing. I feel like it's, the silver lining to this is that we're connecting with amazing people that we otherwise would never come to know, and that's been amazing. I mean, I've been really kind of blown away by all the powerful, strong, committed people that I've gotten to know, and you being one of them. So thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you. Yeah, no,